Blake and I have been married for 3 years. And everyone says we are a loving couple. Only I know that his sister is included in this love. Just like on the night of their 3rd wedding anniversary. She said her illness flared up and asked Blake to take care of her. Turned around and sent me a provocative message. After my asthma attack, I finally understood that I should let go. In another life. Our story has not yet begun. I personally pushed Blake out of my world. Even if he ends up covered in wounds, he will regret it deeply. I have never had the slightest bit of softness in my heart. One on their 3rd wedding anniversary. Chloe called Blake again. This time he consciously placed a soothing kiss on my forehead. Chloe said she is not feeling well. I'll be right back. But I know he won't be back tonight. He knows Chloe's little thoughts. Yet he always tolerates her without any limits. Then come to coax me tirelessly again. The spacious living room has grown cold and quiet, the marble floor reflecting my pale face. There is only the cake we bought to celebrate the anniversary on the coffee table. The candle above is still softly glowing. I clutched my chest, not knowing whether to cry or to laugh. Crying over my marriage that has a hidden third party. Still laughing at me for finally wanting to be free. I don't know how long it has been. But fireworks started to be set off outside. Chloe sent me a message. Sister-in-law. Did you see the fireworks? Blake knows that I like the floor-to-ceiling windows with the sunset shining into the house. So he specifically bought a place here. A flat with a living room that is 100 square meters. You can still see the river flowing through the city. At this moment, the lonely night sky is ignited by fireworks. In my pitch-black eyes, there is an incomparable brightness. My brother is worried that I will be bored alone in the hospital, so he specially had someone play it for me. I heard that today is your wedding anniversary. So I generously let you enjoy it too. Her words are like a sharp knife. A knife stabbed into the heart. Deep without seeing blood, yet it stirs in the heart. My breathing became increasingly rapid. The hand was unsteady for a moment. And the phone fell to the ground. The messages sent from over there are not concealed. Each one exposed before my eyes. Blake, let out a low sorry. Who was just making wishes with me. Is now peeling an apple for Chloe. His handsome face was slightly lowered, carrying an infinite tenderness. The gentleman who once made me proud now makes me feel extremely disgusted. You lost. It's not just couples who can have children. What you can give, I can give as well. Breathing didn't come for a moment. My chest rose and fell more noticeably. And in a panic, my calf tripped over the coffee table and I fell to the ground, only a few steps away from asthma medication. I reached out with all my strength, but I couldn't resist the gradually thinning breath. At the moment of death, my husband set off fireworks all over the city for another woman. And his wife quietly died at home. There was no chance for rescue. I was awakened by my roommate's call in my second life. Ava, let's go to the big classroom to save you a seat, or we won't make it in time. I glanced at my phone. Only then did I realize I had returned to university. When Blake hasn't confessed yet. I hurriedly agreed. And by the time I ran to the classroom and sat down, I still hadn't reacted. At that moment, someone poked my shoulder with the tip of a pen. A piece of chocolate is handed over. Your roommate said you didn't have lunch. So have something sweet to tide you over. A familiar voice is surrounding my ears. Unlike the calm and steady demeanor of a few years later, Blake's voice now still carries the innocence of a college student. He is still the youthful elegance in my dreams. The bangs cover the forehead. Looking obedient and endearing. When Blake first started working, he found that doll-like face really bothersome. Many patients do not trust him because he is young. So I started helping him with his hairstyle. As soon as the forehead was exposed, along with the specially bought non-prescription glasses, the age suddenly increased. I couldn't help but laugh in the mirror. Dr. Chloe looks like she has a few years of experience. Blake is already thin-skinned. And after I teased him, his face turned red for the most part. They can't do anything to me. So they can only pin me against the wall and kiss me forcefully until I'm dizzy. Are you still laughing? It feels like pretending to be a mature adult. In fact, it is more like a little puppy with sharp teeth. I could only hold back my laughter. No more laughing. No more laughing. That day ended only when I begged for mercy. He looks soft and cute. But in reality, he is fierce and ruthless. Recalling these again, I don't have the sweetness I thought I had. I originally thought we would argue and make noise for a lifetime. If you calculate the time carefully, it actually can't last even 3 years. 3 I smiled and politely declined. I have a toothache recently, so it's not suitable for me to eat sweets. Blake's bangs hung down, like a little abandoned and puppy by the roadside. Even the tail is drooping in disappointment. My roommate covered her mouth with a book and quietly asked me, "Did Blake upset you?" Blake is pursuing me. And everyone around us knows. Every time there is such a public class, he will definitely sit next to me. It was only in the year I graduated that I realized he chose internal medicine and directly from surgery in order to take better care of me. In order to prevent me from overthinking. They specifically didn't tell me. He said this is his decision. And he doesn't want me to agree to date him out of guilt. Before knowing Chloe, having fulfilled my sigh, he almost revolved around me entirely. Until he accepted the first patient. For Chloe is actually not his biological sister. She was only 16 when she was hospitalized. And there was no color in her palm-sized face. Every time I bring lunch to Blake, he always has a worried look on his face. At that time, he was still an intern in the hospital and was very afraid that Chloe would be the first patient to die in his care. Therefore, I pay special attention to her. Daily care and fruit feeding are basic skills. They would coax her even before the checkup. Chloe misunderstood. She blushes as soon as she sees Blake. Will use the doctor-patient relationship to let Blake hold her and accompany her. Until the day of her surgery, no one came to the house. It was only after the alarm that I realized her parents couldn't afford the expensive surgery fees and had directly run away. Chloe suddenly lost the desire to live. Later, she prepared to jump down from the tall building. Blake made a promise to her in a fit of rage. I stood behind him, watching him with his eyes full of that girl who was about to disappear. It's just that he didn't look at me for the first time. It's also the first time that the decision made did not involve me. Later, Chloe entered the Chloe family household register. She is clearly just a 16-year-old child. With a smile that makes her eyes curve. Very innocent. Sister. What should I do? I entered Brother Blake's house before you. At that moment, I only felt an emptiness in my heart. It seems that someone has dug a big hole. Only the cold wind blows back and forth. Cold hands and feet. 5 I pulled myself out of my memories and checked the time. There are 3 years left until Chloe's appearance. Blake graduated from medical school a year later than us. And as long as I don't have too much interaction with Blake during this time, my eventual death will definitely change. At first, I was young and vigorous, thinking that I wouldn't lose to this woman who appeared out of nowhere. I didn't expect that in the end. I even lost my life. It's really not worth it when you think about it now. I haven't gone to see the vast world. I haven't measured this world. And I've died absurdly like this. It turns out that when a person is speechless, they really will laugh out loud. I shook my head and put the chocolate from that day out of my mind. I didn't expect that the next day, as my roommate and I just came out of the library, Blake was waiting for me downstairs with the medicine. No matter what, you still need to make it clear to him. My roommate had a hesitant look on her face. After all, Blake's excellence is evident to everyone. A genius-type player. From a wealthy family. And even their personality has no flaws. It is precisely because of this that Chloe Zhang will rush over. There has actually been a rift between us for quite some time. I am a gourd with a sawed mouth. Unable to utter a word even after a beating. Blake is gentle and kind to everyone because of his profession. I can't even tell what he actually likes about me now. Could it be that it's just to be a savior? 6 Didn't you say you had a toothache in class yesterday? I went to buy medicine for you. He is holding a plastic bag in his hand. But because of his outstanding appearance, the bag feels priceless. No need. I coldly refused. Blake looked nervous. I originally planned to bring it to you this morning. But the substitute teacher changed the class, which delayed it until now. He stammered in his explanation, showing none of the calmness and composure he would have later. Even accompanying Chloe to deceive me. They don't even blink. I looked at the boy in front of me with bright eyes. It really can't be connected with him a few years later. How can a man change so quickly in an instant? In the end, I still didn't take his medicine. It also clarified the relationship. I am preparing for graduate school applications and don't want to waste time on other things. I hope everyone can maintain a classmate relationship in the future. Blake said nothing and walked away in a daze. After I went upstairs, my roommate felt a bit reluctant. Your words are too harsh. Our floor is not high. They can hear it. In the face of their compassion, I felt not a ripple in my heart. If his suffering now can exchange for my peace for a lifetime, and I would rather he is in so much pain that he wishes he were dead, at least between us. It is best to have no contact forever. 7 After that day, Blake really didn't come to disturb me again. He even saw me on the road and simply buried his head in his chest. It's like a quail. Later, I successfully applied for graduate school and continued my studies. And occasionally I could hear news about him. I heard that he has received the scholarship again and has become the closed-door disciple of their department's professor. As soon as I left school, I became an intern at the best local hospital. Everything is moving towards the direction of the past life. Besides our relationship, for years later, the tedious study life almost made me forget about Blake. Occasionally, heading fulfilled way at session. In the dreams of midnight, I can still feel the pain and despair of that moment of death. Just being awakened again. Tears can no longer flow from the corners of my eyes. Later, I found a very good job. Become an ordinary worker at a law firm. The latest case taken over is a hospital dispute. Family members suspect that the doctor charged extra fees, resulting in the patient paying a lot of unnecessary money. In such cases, barristers don't have the time to take them, and those with a bit of experience look down on them. In the end, it came down to me and a newly promoted lawyer. When we rushed over, the family members were making a scene at the entrance with a list in hand. In the midst of spitting, I saw Blake. After several years of not seeing him, his figure stood tall like a black bamboo. With his hands in the pockets of his white coat, the youthful innocence of the past had faded, replaced by a kind of elegance reminiscent of noble orchids and jade trees. Even if his family members tugged at the collar of his white coat, he remained silent. The lawyer Caleb beside me quickly stepped forward to pull the family members away. And Blake's gaze fell squarely on me. 8 Because the lawyer intervened, the matter was quickly resolved. Caleb asked me to go shopping and took the family and the dean into the coordination room. I know he is afraid that if the family gets emotional, it might accidentally hurt others. Blake let out a low sigh. Isn't he the one who was accidentally injured? I squatted next to the drink vending machine outside. And the square sun shone down, just enough to warm my head. Although it is late autumn, the sun still carries warmth. Hey! A bottle of orange soda and a can is handed to me. The packaging features long-fingered hands. The fingertips are slightly red, the nails are clean, and there is a faint smell of disinfectant. Thank you. Now my relationship with Blake is not that close, so I do not reject his behavior. He squatted down beside me, his voice low. I thought I would never see you again. I held the bottle of orange juice and forced a couple of laughs. To be honest, I still haven't adapted to being alone with him. Even if the events of the past life seem to have turned a page. But the pain from that year is still unbearable. I did not respond. And a long silence fell between the two. People come and go outside. And the recent commotion did not take up much time. The bustling sounds further highlighted the silence between us. There is also an inexplicable awkwardness. By the way, I see you are a doctor. That's really impressive. Caleb hasn't come out yet, so I can only compliment him a bit. Who knew Blake's eyes were red? It's strange. What's wrong with him now? He starts to cry after just a few words. I secretly complained in my heart. But who knew he lowered his voice? And the loneliness in his tone was very obvious. I am studying medicine. Originally. You have already forgotten me. Only I am still trapped in the past. 9 Blake's words are light. It seems like a small cloud drifting in the sky. But his expression is very serious. It's like I put on pants and don't recognize people. Like a promiscuous girl. I remained silent for a long time before letting out a sigh. For Blake in this lifetime, He hasn't had the chance to do anything wrong yet. After all, in college, I became the person who refused to socialize in a cliff-like manner. He once tried to get close, but I decisively rejected him. Even on the day of the graduation photo, he stood at a distance holding flowers, silently watching me and countless classmates take pictures together. The last bouquet of flowers was also passed on by my roommate. I just threw it in the trash can that night. Without hesitation, I boarded the flight home. After that day, it is today. In Blake's eyes, I really went too far. But in the world he doesn't know, my behavior is just the normal state. My heels are numb from squatting, so I have to stand up and prepare to stomp my feet. Who would have thought that one person lost their balance and fell forward? Blake was quick and swiftly pulled me up. Fortunately, having fulfilled my obsession, the face is not disfigured. I covered my face in fear and finally softened my tone. Thank you. Blake glanced at me, squinting and smiling. It's okay. Even if you hurt your face, I'll help you find a skilled teacher, guaranteed to leave no trace. After this conversation, the atmosphere between us has become a little less tense. After a few sentences, Blake is still no different from college. Facial features are well defined, and the temperament is clean. Unexplainably, he has gained a maturity that does not belong to him. He was questioned by the patient about his young age or whether something had happened. It's just that I'm the one who would organize his outfit and hairstyle. In fact, there is no one in this world without whom it cannot turn. Blake is. Me too. As the light tilted slightly, Caleb came out from inside. The signs of time are evident on the face. The family members, on the contrary, looked energetic, and one might think they had absorbed Caleb's vitality. I was just about to go up and speak. The long-lost magical sound echoed in my ears. Brother. The first time Chloe entered our little home was the day after we returned from our honeymoon. She opened my door while carrying a small box. Because the door lock is a password, she easily got in. Where is my brother? Blake's honeymoon was hard-earned, so I went to work the next day. I discussed with him that he would handle external matters while I would take care of internal ones. But Chloe suddenly showed up, which was something I didn't expect. I called Blake, and the nurse said he was on the operating table. I can only let Chloe stay at home for now. She had a conflict with her roommate, so she is preparing to move out of the dormitory. Blake learned about this news in the evening and immediately refused. I just got married to your sister-in-law. What does it matter if you move in? After several years of work experience, Blake's appearance has completely changed. Those bright eyes became deep and profound over time. Tomorrow, go look at the house by yourself. Whichever one you like. I'll give you the money, and you can buy it yourself. Chloe mumbled. Her appearance was already striking, and with the years of living in comfort, her originally narrow cheeks have filled out, making her look quite radiant. Just as I was about to step in to smooth things over, Chloe got up and leaned on Blake's back. Peach-like lips leaned close to Blake's ear. A breath that is tempting. Brother, aren't you afraid that I might be in danger alone? I stared blankly, unable to believe the two people in front of me. Blake seemed to be used to it. Just used his hands to pry open the two hands that were holding his shoulders. You have grown up now. You can't do this anymore. I tightened my grip on the chopsticks. Even though she was a minor, Chloe was already 16 at that time. Right? But Chloe was very natural and stamped her foot. Okay. I've grown up. I'm an adult now. After I move out, I'm going to date and bring men home. You dare. Chloe finally decided to stay. Blake's excuse to me was that she was still young, and it was like learning in advance how to take care of a child. But a child shouldn't be wearing silk pajamas in the middle of the night to look for Blake, who is still working. They won't cuddle on the sofa, feeding each other while watching TV. It won't use the excuse that the shower is broken and make Blake go fix it. What started as cautious probing has turned into a blatant provocation. 11 Chloe's appearance completely brought forward my nightmare. Now, even just hearing her call out brother makes my hair stand on end. Blake introduced me. This is my first patient. I can no longer hear the rest of what was said. It goes without saying that he still felt compassion. Before getting married, Chloe was raised in the old family home of the Chloe family, which is in a different city from us. But now, how could she appear here? Are you still holding a lunchbox? Are they already living together? I forced a smile, trying my best to prevent the hatred from my past life from spreading onto my face in this life. If you don't want to live your life with hatred, you must force yourself to learn to cut it off. I didn't expect you to get married. Next time I'll make up the gift money. Caleb interjected beside. So drive. Chloe got married young. I really couldn't tell. Chloe blushed completely upon hearing us say that. The sunlight shone on her face, making her look even more vibrant. Blake let out a low sigh. However, turned his gaze to my face and frowned a bit unhappily. She is now my sister on the same household registration book. I am currently single and not married. There was a mix-up, and Leo insisted on treating everyone. After all, knowing a doctor does make life a bit more convenient. On the way to the restaurant, Caleb mumbled to me. Even my doctor friends didn't tell me. Which made me have to wait in line to get my wisdom teeth pulled. And that doctor is really rough. I looked at the receding scenery outside the window and replied irritably. First, I haven't seen Drive Chloe for several years. Secondly, even if I really have his contact information, you still have to wait in line for your wisdom tooth extraction. Which is not contradictory. Caleb pouted, stingy. I directly punched him. And he shut up cleanly and neatly. 12 This life's memories have not changed yet. Chloe is still a patient of Blake. From seeing the doctor to being hospitalized. And then later being abandoned by her parents. Finally, heading fulfilledly, Blake took it upon himself to push it down. A colleague asked him under what name. Blake spoke firmly after a long silence. Brother. But strangely, Chloe did not go to the Chloe family ancestral home. Perhaps it's because I wasn't in between them. Therefore, when getting along, it will be a bit more unrestrained. Just like now. Without my involvement. She is still as close to Blake as ever. As soon as Blake sat down, she couldn't wait to lean against him. Caleb raised his eyebrows slightly. And the look in his eyes was not very innocent. I gestured for him not to worry and pulled him down to sit with me. When ordering, what Blake said was all things I like. Caleb asked me while blocking his face with the menu. When did you start eating so lightly? I maintained my expression and did not deliberately lower my voice. The taste has changed a long time ago. I also specifically ordered a few spicy dishes. Blake's expression changed slightly. And he lowered his gaze to the table, feeling a bit more desolate for no reason. At first, he liked light flavors. So my taste was the same as his. But now I don't need to accommodate anyone. Eat whatever you naturally want to eat. 13 This meal was not enjoyable. Clearly, annoyed. Chloe is still not very bold at the moment. She just glanced at me with her eyes. Still unable to engage in face-to-face provocation. It's Blake, who either serves me food or pours me water. He didn't eat much himself during the meal. Even Caleb, no matter how dull, can sense something. Only when he returned to the company did he breathe a sigh of relief. Is your college classmate still secretly in love with you? After all, ordinary classmates wouldn't be so attentive after a long separation. And they would keep hinting around. Just short of directly asking for the family's specific address. Caleb rubbed his shoulders and said, Be careful. Don't get caught in a pig-killing scam. I feel that he has a bit of a relationship with his sister. A careless remark. Yet it struck me like a heavy hammer and woke me up. In just the time it took to have a meal, Caleb realized the problems between them. And I spent a good part of my life believing that they were really just siblings. Constantly waking up in the middle of the night to check online. Is there true friendship between the opposite sexes? This question has been haunting me for a long time. It's like a thin fishing line wrapping around me, making it hard to even breathe. As long as I am a little careless, the thread will tighten around me. Bit by bit. It strips my skin and pulls out my bones. 14 After work, I didn't choose to go home. Instead, I took 3 days off to fly back to my hometown. It rained heavily before leaving. Leo called me, Where are you? I was taken aback for a moment. I'm going to the airport. Preparing to go home and rest for 2 days. He should be driving. And the sound of rain is pattering against the window on the phone. Such a coincidence? What's wrong? I just went to the hospital to get some information. And guess what? Doctor, I also got into a car accident on the way to the airport. Is he on a business trip? Leo paused. This is not very clear. It is said that the injuries are quite serious. The whole car flipped over. And if someone hadn't discovered it in time, it would probably have resulted in missing arms and broken legs. That's really a pity. Leo asked. What did you just say? I shook my head and quickly changed the subject. Just dive well. I hung up the phone after just a couple of sentences. Driving on a rainy day is inherently more mentally exhausting. If it crashes like Blake, then it's not worth it. I watched the continuous pouring rain outside, gripping my phone tightly. If I were to act like I used to, I would definitely tear up the plane ticket and go to him without a care. In my world, nothing is more important than him. But right now, I'm just worried about whether I can board the flight normally. Fortunately, heading fulfilled the obsession. The prompt sound rang out. And everything proceeded normally. Waiting for the plane to take off, the feeling of weightlessness makes me feel dazed. I couldn't help but grip the armrest of the chair with my fingers. This feeling was no different from the moment before death. But my medicine is right in my pocket. It's not on the unreachable TV cabinet. It was not until the moment the flight attendant's voice reached my ears that I regained my senses. I did not marry Blake. I will not die either. After returning home, my parents were still on the same topic, marriage. They have just lowered their demands now. As long as they are from the same place, they can accept it even if they are struggling outside. Since they took a step back, I don't want to make things too tense. But at the moment I saw Caleb, I couldn't help but twitch my lips. Are you the talented, good-looking, and wealthy Aunt Fang was talking about? Caleb also looks frustrated as if he has been deceived. You still have the nerve to say that. Aunt Fang praised you to the heavens. And you didn't even look at the photos? I took out a photo that only showed a silhouette. Are you talking about Bess? Aunt Fang said the young man is shy and not in his hometown. Only this photo was taken secretly by his parents. It looks like the lens is distorted. But you can also see that the height is not bad and the figure is okay. But who would have thought he was Caleb? Aunt Fang said your pre-tax salary is $17,000. Can our law firm have such a high salary after becoming permanent? Caleb rubbed his earlobe, feeling unusually awkward. I said 10,000. My parents said we could use a system. And getting to 2 already counts as listening to me. I smiled and felt it was so interesting for the first time. Simply go along with the mistake. In order to have a peaceful new year, we agreed to cover for each other. I feel like I can still get in touch. This sentence is sent to Aunt Fang separately. She was so happy that she kept slapping her thigh. Very satisfied. And our parents on both sides finally stopped sending messages. 15 It was already late when Caleb sent me home. Remember to organize the materials for work tomorrow, as they will be needed for the meeting. As soon as the topic of work comes up, he becomes a completely different person. I nodded impatiently, heading fulfilledly. After all, no one likes to bring up the pain of going to work tomorrow on the last day of the weekend. Just as I was about to go out, Leo hesitated and looked at me. I heard that drive. Chloe was discharged from the hospital these days. Do you want to go with me to say hello? I closed the car door. No matter what you do, you can't cut in line when getting your wisdom teeth pulled. He slammed the steering wheel, looking regretful. The evenings in late autumn are always desolate. The ground is already covered with yellow leaves. I rubbed my nose and walked into the elevator to go upstairs to sleep. I wouldn't put on makeup or wear colored contact lenses if I knew my blind date was Caleb. Wasting my money. The elevator door opened. And I shifted my gaze away from my phone. The door opposite opened. And I was startled. It is Blake wearing loungewear. I breathed a sigh of relief and then became alert again. What are you doing here? Blake's eyes carried an unspeakable sadness as he looked me up and down for a long time before finally saying, I didn't expect you to come back so late. I instinctively felt something was off, so I thought about ending the topic quickly. As a result, Blake walked out directly. The door closed instantly. He probably didn't have time to change the fingerprint password lock. And once this door is locked, there is no key. He looked at me so charmingly. Done, laissez-moi sorry. I didn't bring the key. Cool langue. No shoes on my feet. The black hair tips are dripping with water. Clearly just washed. I sighed. Then come in with me. In this life, Blake is still as confused as in college. 16 I found a new towel for him, and also took a clean thin blanket. Today you will sleep here. Tomorrow I will find a locksmith for you. By the way, how did you end up living here? Blake obediently rubbed his hair with a towel. Her eyes are lowered, not daring to look at me. Just staring blankly at the ground, not knowing what to think. After a while, he said gloomily, I moved. I don't know why. He suddenly intensified his tone. I sent Chloe back. And from now on, I will live alone. I was taken aback for a moment and didn't think much about his somewhat downcast expression. Maybe talking to Caleb too much has made me a bit dull. Nodded and shuffled into the bedroom in slippers. But I also didn't forget to lock the door. The next morning, I smelled the aroma of porridge. Dazed and confused, Blake was wearing my apron and was busy in the kitchen with his back to me. When did you learn to cook porridge? As soon as I opened my mouth. The person was startled awake. Blake's body stiffened as well. In this lifetime, I haven't married Blake. So whether he can cook shouldn't be within my understanding. Fortunately, having fulfilled Blake didn't think too much and continued to work hard while carrying me on his back. I've been alone for too long. I pouted. Don't think I forgot that Chloe brought him food a few days ago. Looking at the breakfast spread all over the table, I suddenly lost my appetite. To keep myself busy, I simply found a locksmith for him. Blake's expression is a bit disappointing for some reason. I'll help you finish it before leaving. I don't need it anymore. I'm going to work now. After some consideration, I turned my face away and said, moreover, I don't like outsiders in my home. Blake's expression suddenly changed. Embarrassed, she took off the apron and carefully folded the blanket for me. Then shall I wash it for you and bring it back? I finally became a bit impatient. No need. Just leave it there. Anyway, it will end up in the trash can like breakfast. 17 I don't know if it's my illusion, but it feels a bit strange to meet Blake again this time. He seems very nervous. Afraid of saying the wrong thing or doing something that would make me unhappy. But in reality, I did not. I even hope he can take the initiative to leave sooner. Just like when we were in the hospital. Polite socializing is enough. I rubbed my hair. Just as the locksmith arrived. Blake no longer has any excuses left. Can only go out with my head down. I waited until he came in before going out. The door slammed shut. And I couldn't help but look towards the opposite door. TSK it seems I have to consider moving. However, I didn't run into him for several days afterwards. The company's matters have become a mess. I often end up reversing my day and night, and several times I've slept directly at the company. For a moment, I also put the moving matter out of my mind. By the time I remember again, the day has already reached Christmas. That day, Blake knocked on my door early in the morning. Is there something wrong? Blake visibly relaxed. I thought you weren't home. He rubbed the corner of his clothes. I wanted to ask you, what plans do you have for today? Caleb suddenly popped up at this moment. Aren't you ready yet? My attention was disrupted. And after opening the door to let him in, I politely smiled at Blake. Sorry. I have plans today. Blake's smile just hung stiffly on his face. Even the breathing has stopped. I closed the door directly, leaving him outside. Caleb was sitting casually on the sofa, looking at me and sighing. Aren't you being too harsh on Drive? Chloe? Then why don't you accompany him today? Dr. Chloe looks quite impressive. It's not impossible. I sneered. Be careful. It's a beast in human clothing. 18 The Christmas atmosphere on the street is very strong. The festive atmosphere is everywhere. I took a photo with Caleb and sent it to our parents. Caleb sighed. If you weren't my colleague, I might really pursue you. I laughed and said, what's wrong? Is a colleague not good enough for you? At least I don't want to see you at work every day. I was amused by his words. But I couldn't find anything to refute them. Falling in love with a colleague is really quite a difficult thing. We played until very late before going home. Caleb took me downstairs again. This time he didn't choose to go upstairs. Just nodded with his chin towards a spot not far away. That drive. Chloe seems to be quite infatuated. I followed his gaze, and in that moment, the good mood I had just a moment ago vanished completely. Under the dim street-eyed, Blake stood still. Still wearing the clothes from the day. Not sure how long I've waited. Leo thoughtfully left space for both of us to leave on our own. Come back. His eyes lit up when he looked at me. But the next moment his smile froze. The night air rushed towards him. And even his voice was trembling. Are you in a relationship now? Or? He couldn't bring himself to say the two words marriage. As if only by doing so could he continue to maintain a facade of calm. Blake let out a low sigh. I thought my performance was enough to make you understand. I met his gaze. And for some reason, my heart trembled. It is impossible between us. No matter what we do. It is impossible. Blake's eyes showed a look of confusion. And he hurriedly reached out to grab my hand. I just instinctively stepped back, leaving him stunned in place. Hair fell in pieces. Looking quite disheveled. I know. But you have to give me a chance. He was a bit flustered and spoke in a stammer. At least let me compete with him fairly. My voice fell by your ear. Extremely indifferent. Blake. If I really liked Leo, there wouldn't be fairness between you two. Just like in the last life you treated me, and Chloe. If it weren't for your default, how could she treat me that way? Among all the means she used to hurt me. You are the accomplice. 19 Blake is acting strange tonight. He seems to be possessed. Constantly nitpicking over small matters with me. Not at all as relaxed and calm as when we met in the hospital. Blake, it's impossible for us. I will never choose you in this lifetime. Blake was anxious. Is it just because nothing has started? This statement is inexplicable. But I understood it. Because it hasn't started. He feels that victory is in his grasp. As long as he doesn't let Chloe come this time. Then we will start over. My temples throbbed. And I took a big step back. Yes, having fulfilled my obsession. It's because nothing has started. Blake's expression changed. And he hurriedly explained to me. No. Chloe has already been sent away by me. She will definitely not be an obstacle between us. What happened after that? I looked at him mockingly. His face red with embarrassment. Chloe is still on the same household registration as you. Right? She is still your sister. Isn't she? The two characters, sister, are pronounced very accurately by me. No one is willing to marry someone who has a half-sibling to be their partner for the rest of their life. I was foolish once. I won't be foolish a second time. At this moment, the snow is falling in flurries. At this moment, the lonely night sky is ignited by fireworks. They say that if you watch the first snow with someone you like, you will grow old together. I don't want to grow old with Blake. So I stepped directly into the hallway. By the way, Blake, having fulfilled my session. Don't show up in front of me again. Consider it atonement. Blake's body swayed unsteadily. Not knowing how much he had absorbed, his personality has always been arrogant, and my not giving him face is already enough to make him uncomfortable. Thinking too highly of oneself. Believing that just by lowering one's head, one can regain the love of the past. In fact, we have long been riddled with wounds. Whether he has been reborn like me, what has obtained his past memories in some other way. At least in this lifetime. I am already prepared not to step into the fire pit again. Later, Leo told me that Blake had removed Chloe from the household registration. Chloe finally reverted to her original surname. However, before that, Chloe said she would sue to take half of Blake's parents' estate. Despite losing the lawsuit, the Chloe family's parents were still very angry. I would say, Blake will probably never be able to shake off his sister for a lifetime. Leo is gloating. He has been going to court frequently lately, probably wanting to know the outcome of this matter. It's just that these have become a breeze in my ears. It blew away and scattered. Chloe has become obsessed with Blake. She has already been shadowed by abandonment. And Blake unhesitatingly tore apart the last connection between them. How could Chloe possibly accept it? Next. It's just dogs biting dogs. The snow outside is getting heavier. And there is a wave of warmth from the air conditioning on my body. It is also mixed with Leo and his colleagues' playful teasing. It turns out that the feeling of being alive is so good. End of text. After my husband died in a car accident, my in-laws coaxed me into giving birth to our posthumous child. But the child was born with a heart problem and needed a heart transplant. While I was busy looking for a matching donor, they secretly cut off the child's medical expenses, leading to the child's death. Later, I found out that my posthumous child was not my husband's only child. While my in-laws were enjoying family happiness with the illegitimate child, I was wandering the streets with my daughter's ashes. In a trance, I got into a car accident. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn. I had the fetus aborted, retrieved my share of the inheritance, and discovered a shocking secret. That illegitimate child was not actually my husband's. When I was reborn at my husband's funeral, the car accident was so tragic that Caleb was almost unrecognizable. It was only with great difficulty that we found a highly skilled mortician to piece his body back together. My in-laws were slumped over his body, sobbing and gasping for breath. The pain of losing a son in middle age would make anyone feel compassion. But whenever I thought about how, in my previous life, they deliberately imposed the pain of losing a daughter on me, when I saw the scene in front of me, all I wanted to say was, "You deserve it. Caleb. Why did you leave so suddenly? You've left your father and me with no hope. How are we supposed to live?" Sigh, having fulfilled my sigh. The Caleb family's line has ended like this. We'll have no face to meet our ancestors when we die. When my mother-in-law was tired from wailing, her blood-red eyes turned and stared fixedly at me. "Aurora, it's all your fault. You insisted on being a dink before. Now you've made the Caleb family extinct. Are you satisfied?" I really had no way to defend myself. Caleb had as the no spermia, and my chances of getting pregnant were very low. But to save his face, I always said in front of them that I didn't want a child, taking most of the blame. Yet, fate played a cruel trick. Just before his accident, I got pregnant. I originally thought of hiding the fact of my pregnancy this time, secretly having the child aborted, and then taking a share of the inheritance and leaving. Since he's already gone, I'll tell the truth. It wasn't me who didn't want a child all along. It was. Ugh. Ugh. I tried to explain. But before I could finish, my stomach suddenly churned, and I couldn't help but retch. What do you mean? Are you going to throw up just because I said a few words to you? Or did Caleb's current state scare you? His body is still warm. Do you have any conscience? I think it was you, the jinx, who caused his accident. The hatred in my mother-in-law's eyes seemed to swallow me up. After saying that, she was about to hit me. Her rough hand was raised high. I quickly bent down and instinctively protected my stomach. The pain I expected didn't come. I looked up and found that my father-in-law had timely grabbed my mother-in-law's hand. He pulled my mother-in-law behind him, composed his grief-stricken expression, and asked me tentatively, "Aurora, are you pregnant?" To my mother-in-law was arrogant and domineering. But my father-in-law was very shrewd. He saw something was wrong with me at a glance. From that day on, until Caleb's funeral and cremation, my mother-in-law watched over me 24 hours a day in the name of taking care of me. As soon as the funeral ended, my in-laws rushed me to the hospital for a checkup. The results showed that I was already 3 months pregnant. They couldn't stop smiling when they held the pregnancy test form. If I hadn't been reborn, I might have been moved by their reaction at this moment and chosen to give birth to the child. But after seeing through their true colors, I felt no joy at this moment. Only annoyance and regret. I was annoyed that I couldn't be reborn before getting pregnant, and I regretted that I couldn't hold back just now. "Aurora, look. Mom didn't know you were pregnant. I said those things to you before because Caleb left so suddenly. I just couldn't accept it at that moment. Don't take it too hard. It's not good for the baby." My mother-in-law started to be nice to me for the sake of the baby in my belly. She even changed the way she addressed me. I really should have realized how quickly she could change her attitude. But what was I to them? I wasn't just a tool for them to carry on the family line. Was I supposed to ruin my whole life just to satisfy their wishes? I had already harmed my child once. And I would never do it again. It wasn't that I was heartless. It was just that even if this child was born, she probably wouldn't live long. Caleb says the no sperm IA caused the child to develop poorly. And she had congenital heart disease. 3 in my previous life. As soon as she was born, a heart problem was detected. And she was sent to the ICU. By the time she was 3 months old, her condition had deteriorated to the point where she needed a heart transplant. I entrusted her to my in-laws' care and went around looking for a matching heart donor. But I never expected that when I saw her again, her small, warm body had become cold and stiff, and she had already lost her vital signs. My mother-in-law had tears in her eyes. Aurora, the child couldn't be saved. But the hospital told me that they had privately stopped the medical expenses and given up treatment. I wanted them to see our daughter for the last time. But they made all kinds of excuses and refused to attend. After the funeral that day, I couldn't bear to leave her alone in the cemetery. So I insisted on taking the child home. I was walking alone on the street with her ashes. In a trance. I was hit by a speeding car and died on the spot. It was only after I died that I found out that at that time, they were enjoying family happiness with Caleb's illegitimate child. Thinking of this, my hatred reached its peak at this moment. I watched my mother-in-law's mouth open and close in front of me. I hated her so much that I wanted to tear it apart. But on the surface, I was calm. Chapter 2. The best show is always left until the end, isn't it? I blinked my eyes. And tears fell again. Mom, heading fulfilled my obsession. What are you talking about? I love Caleb so much. How could I bear to abort the child? But, I paused as if hesitant to speak. My mother-in-law hurriedly asked, what are your concerns? Tell us. We'll definitely meet your needs if we can. Mom and Dad. I haven't worked in the past few years and have been relying on Caleb to support me. Now that he's gone, he only left a little property. In the future, I'll have to take care of the child and support myself. It will be very difficult. I stopped talking at that point. For this was my only chance to fight for my inheritance. Before Caleb's mistress showed up with her pregnant belly, my father-in-law, who was experienced in business, immediately understood. Aurora, as long as you give birth to the child, I'll transfer the house in the city center to your name right away and hire an nanny for you. I sniffed. Dad, wouldn't I be like a fish on the chopping block at that time? At your mercy? What do you mean? Blake seemed hesitant to speak. I knew what he was worried about. This old fox was reluctant to give much property to his own son back then. Caleb only had a few worthless storefronts in the suburbs under his name, with a total value of less than $1 million. I said, Mom and Dad, I don't ask for much. I just thought that when Caleb was alive, he promised to give me the shops in the western suburbs to open a store so that I wouldn't be too bored. Now that he's gone, according to the inheritance law, the current shops have to be divided among me, his parents, and me. Naturally, I can't make the decision alone. When his father heard that I only wanted this, he obviously relaxed and waved his hand. I understand. You can rest assured and take care of your pregnancy. I'll have someone transfer those shops to your name. As for the rest of his inheritance, we won't take it. I sneered inwardly. The rest? What else is there? It sounds so real. But on the surface, I nodded sadly and continued to cry while holding Caleb's photo. The transfer procedures were completed quickly. Although they are not valuable now, it doesn't mean they won't be in the future. Within the next year, that piece of land will be expropriated to build the transportation hub that connects the most areas within the city. And those few storefronts of mine happen to be outside the demolition area and face the exit of the railway station. One can imagine the large flow of people. 5. Although my father-in-law is wealthy and doesn't care about such trifles, my mother-in-law became dissatisfied with me because of this. My son's first 7-day mourning period hasn't passed yet, and you're already thinking about dividing the family property. You're really heartless. My mother-in-law forced a smile. I silently raised my eyebrows and thought seriously, am I really that heartless? What I didn't expose was that Caleb was supposed to be on a business trip out of town that day. But he had a car accident in this city. He lied to me. Why? Most likely, It was to meet his lover. But he didn't expect to lose his life. Although my mother-in-law doesn't know about this now. Her actions after she found out in my previous life were enough to make my heart cold. I calculated that what should be obtained has been obtained, and I'm too lazy to act anymore. Seeing that there was no one around, I replied casually, "Mom, if you think my conditions are too much, there's another way. You and Dad can have another child." "You? How could you become like this?" She was so angry that she subconsciously wanted to hit me again. Ouch. My stomach hurts. As soon as I covered my stomach, she had to withdraw her hand resentfully. Seeing her deflated, I felt satisfied and then said seriously, "Mom, in that case, I'd better go back to my parents' home to have a baby." "Okay. But don't forget that the house in the city center will only be given to you when my grandson is safely born," my mother-in-law reminded me. In my mother-in-law's eyes, I'm already a woman who can be easily manipulated for the sake of money. So she was sure that I wouldn't dare and wouldn't be willing to do anything to the child in my belly. And she let me go back to my parent home with confidence. But in fact, I was already considering which hospital would be safer for an abortion. 6 After returning home, I told my parents about Caleb's affair during his lifetime. They were very angry. But now that the person is dead, there's no point in blaming him anymore. They strongly supported my decision to have an abortion. So, accompanied by my family, I went to the hospital for an abortion as scheduled. My mother stewed all kinds of soups for me every day. She said, "This confinement after an abortion is also very important for a woman. Mom has to take good care of you to avoid leading any health problems." I nestled in my mother's arms and asked her, "I aborted your granddaughter. Don't you blame me?" "Silly child. You have to think about your own life. You're still so young. Caleb is gone. But you still have your own life to live." How could Mom blame her own daughter for the sake of an unborn life? I regretted being deceived by the hypocritical faces of my in-laws in my previous life. Which made my parents, who loved me deeply, so worried. Fortunately, having fulfilled my obsession, I still have a chance to make up for it. It has been over a month since I moved back home. According to my memory of the previous life, his lover, Vivian, was pregnant around the same time as me. Thinking of this, I laughed at myself. I painstakingly helped him improve his physical condition. But in the end, it was all for someone else. Vivian is now 4 months pregnant. An amniocentesis can be done to confirm the identity of the child. I think she should have gone to my in-laws and confronted them. So I called my mother-in-law and invited her to my home. Chapter 3 When we met again. Her back was obviously much straighter than before. And her concern for me seemed more like a routine. I sneered in my heart, having a backup really makes a difference. 7 As soon as my mother-in-law entered the door and saw me lying in bed, she showed an unhappy expression. "How can a pregnant woman lie in bed all day long? You should get up and walk around." "Mom, Annette, you're wronging me as soon as you come. I'm lying down because my stomach hurts." Hearing this, she was startled and came up to touch my stomach. "Are you okay?" Fortunately, having fulfilled my obsession, I had bought a fake belly online and tied it on in advance. So she didn't notice anything strange. After a few more polite remarks, she stopped pretending. "Our agreement still stands. You just need to take good care of your pregnancy. Otherwise, even if you have those few storefronts in the suburbs, they're worthless." I smiled and agreed, only hoping that they wouldn't regret it later. Thinking of Vivian's matter again, I asked subtly, "Mom, having fulfilled my obsession, actually, I can't figure out Caleb's death." Hearing this, my mother-in-law's expression became serious. "What's wrong? Wasn't it a car accident?" "Yes, having fulfilled my obsession. But he was supposed to be on a business trip out of town that day. Why did he have an accident here? I'm wondering if he was hiding something from me." My mother-in-law's eyes dodged. Well, this is a matter between you two. I don't know. Alas. And besides, he's already dead. Don't dwell on these things." "Yeah, you're right. But there's one more thing I can't hide from you." I looked straight into my mother-in-law's eyes and said word by word. I recently went for a 4D ultrasound and found that the child in my belly is born with a disability. She doesn't have arms. 8. What? Are you sure? My mother-in-law was shocked. I was silent for a moment. Then reached out and took out the 4D ultrasound report I had prepared in advance from under the bed. My mother-in-law couldn't understand it. But she could read. She could understand the suggestion at the bottom. Suggested induced labor. Her face lost its color, but soon returned to normal. Aurora. Since that's the case, Mom can't bear to see you burdened. Why don't you have an induced labor while the fetus is still small? Huh. With a backup. She treats me like this. There's not a single bit of heartache for my unborn child in her words. Even though this was within my plan, I still couldn't help but feel bitterly disappointed. Mom. This is Caleb's only bloodline. I threw myself into her arms, weeping. How could you be so heartless? Although my mother-in-law was also sad. Compared to being burdened and by a disabled child for a lifetime, she made up her mind. Aurora, even if this child is born, we won't be responsible. Your father-in-law and I have discussed it. We'll give you a sum of compensation, and then you can have the child aborted. That's exactly what I was waiting for. I raised my head from her embrace, my eyes blurred with tears, and said, then, wet out. How much can you give me? My mother-in-law couldn't make a decision on her own. So she immediately called my father-in-law. The two quickly reached an agreement: my child must not become a burden to Caleb's illegitimate child. So they agreed to transfer the house in the city center to my name as originally agreed, on the condition that I had the child aborted. After that, my mother-in-law left. 9. Without the child. They no longer pretended. After settling all the accounts with me, they intended to draw a clear line with me. After I sent the hospital report to my mother-in-law, she came to my place again. Aurora, let's be straightforward with you. Since Caleb is gone, we don't want to hold you back. When are you going to go back and pack your things? I asked coldly. Are you in such a hurry to kick me out of the house? My mother-in-law sneered. What's the use of keeping a hen that can't lay eggs? My mother happened to enter my room. She couldn't stand it anymore and stood up to speak for me. We're all women. But only you would regard yourself as a tool for childbearing. We've given you the money. We're not treating you badly. Don't be ungrateful. After saying that, my mother-in-law walked away haughtily, ignoring us. I stopped my mother, who was about to argue, and whispered to her, the best part is yet to come. My mother asked me, is it because Caleb's mistress outside is also pregnant? That's why they're so heartless and unscrupulous. I didn't confirm or deny it. After being reborn, I was unwilling to be played around by their family like in my previous life. So while they were dealing with the aftermath, I got Caleb's phone in advance and found Vivian's contact information through the call records. However, from the existing evidence, their communication seemed to normal. I recalled every bit of my time with Caleb. To be honest, I couldn't think of anything abnormal about him. But there was indeed someone who behaved very strangely. So, a bold speculation germinated in my mind. But due to its outrageousness, I didn't dare to jump to conclusions. Anyway, I had to meet Vivian first. So on the first day I got home, before Vivian could find my in-laws, I invited her out. This time, I wanted to use her to stir up trouble. The more chaotic the better. The first step was to whet her appetite. Vivian was as gentle-looking as her name suggested. She seemed plain. Her background was as I had imagined: a father who gambled, a mother who was ill, a brother who was studying, and a broken-hearted her. She was on guard against my arrival. But I came straight to the point. You're pregnant, right? Vivian was very cautious and didn't say a word. I smiled and reached out to touch my belly. So am I. I hope it's a boy so that he can inherit the Blake group. She remained silent. You know, Caleb just died in a car accident. But I'm the wife they married into the family through proper channels. When my father-in-law heard that I was pregnant, he was so happy. He gave me a large flat in the city center without hesitation. And there are also several storefronts. When I went to handle the transfer the other day, my hand was sore from signing. Vivian finally turned her gaze from the cup in her hand to me. Although she tried to hide it well, I could still tell that she was affected. I also looked back at her with a smile, disdain and provocative. As for you, a mistress with no status, don't think about letting the bastard in your belly fight for a position with my child. I can give you a sum of money. You can have an abortion. Consider it as compensation. Vivian finally couldn't hold it in. Who sent you to persuade me? I was taken aback. Since Caleb was dead, I couldn't say it was him. So I said it was my father-in-law. It's my father-in-law. Blake's idea. You know he's very traditional and won't recognize a child born out of wedlock like yours. Vivian's hands clenched tighter and tighter. She was almost breaking her own nails. Seeing that I had angered her enough, I put 200 yuan bills on the table and got up to leave. Before I walked out of the door, I heard the sound of a cup breaking behind me. Yes, pedant. Very good. Just like that. Go and make a scene at their place soon. 11. I told my mother about my first meeting with Vivian. She was puzzled. Even if you want your mother-in-law to lower her guard against you, you don't have to get involved in this matter. I smiled mysteriously and said something that would shock everyone, including myself in the previous life. That child isn't Caleb's at all. It's my father-in-law, Blake's. Yes, Edding fulfilled my say. Before, I had always thought that Caleb lied to me because he was having an affair, but the car accident came suddenly. How could he have had time to make all the chat records with Vivian look so natural? They added each other as friends just one day ago. And the conversation only had one sentence. Let's talk in person. Chapter 4. So I thought carefully about what happened in my previous life. After the car accident, my mother-in-law and I were first concerned about Caleb's condition. But my father-in-law first asked about the location of the accident, as if he had known all along that Caleb was in a place where he shouldn't have been. During the days of Caleb's funeral, my father-in-law seemed particularly preoccupied. He even got distracted frequently when talking about Caleb. I was immersed in grief at that time and didn't notice. But now that I think about it, it's really suspicious. Subsequently, Vivian quietly entered the Caleb family with the child, armed with a paternity test. But in my previous life, I was staying in the Caleb family to have the baby. My mother-in-law valued the child in my belly, and almost watched over me and took care of me at home all day. Since Vivian couldn't get in touch with my mother-in-law, she could only get in touch with my father-in-law. My father-in-law must have made some promises to her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have taken such a big risk. She couldn't afford to lose. Later, when my daughter was seriously ill, they resolutely gave up treatment. Why? Although my mother-in-law was fierce, it was my father-in-law who held the power of decision-making at home. Gradually, I realized that in this matter, apart from the female protagonist Vivian, the other crucial person was my father-in-law, Blake. 12. I also checked the chat and transfer records between Caleb and Blake. Although most of them were voice chats, and it was hard to see anything suspicious. A transfer of 2 million caught my eye. The time was the day before his accident. Subsequently, Caleb lied to me about going on a business trip and actually went to a certain place in the urban area. But before he arrived, he had an accident. And that 2 million became part of his inheritance. What's more, he had as the no sperm. My getting pregnant was already a small probability event. The probability of both Vivian and me getting pregnant at the same time was even 1 in 10,000. After careful analysis, a bold idea emerged in my mind. So, I decided to test Vivian first. Throughout the conversation, I didn't reveal my identity. Nor did I say whose mistress she was. And I didn't clearly state that the child in her belly was Caleb's. When she asked, "Who sent you to persuade me?" I knew my speculation was right. Caleb was already dead. If the child she was carrying was Caleb's, there was no reason for her to be so affected when she heard the name Blake. So, the outline of my speculation took shape. My father-in-law, Blake, had an illegitimate child outside. And for some unknown reason, he gave Caleb 2 million yuan and asked him to negotiate with Vivian so that he could stay out of it. But who would have thought that his only son would lose his life? He then started to worry about whether the matter had been accomplished. If it had been, the Caleb family would really have no descendants. After learning about the accident location, although he was sad, He also felt a sense of relief. There was always a way out. Vivian's child was still alive. He secretly made some promises to Vivian to reassure her to give birth to the child. But unexpectedly, my daughter was born and healthy. By then, he already had a backup plan. There was no need to spend a large amount of money on the treatment of an unimportant child. So he simply took this opportunity to pin the blame of his illegitimate child on Caleb and let that child replace my daughter's status and start living. As for Vivian, I don't know what happened to her later. Maybe Blake gave her a few million yuan to settle her family. And she left willingly. Through this test, although I wasn't completely certain, I felt that I was getting closer to the truth. 13 Another month passed, and I had recuperated almost completely. Thinking that there was still a very important thing left in the Caleb family, I prepared to go there and pack it up. Unexpectedly, I happened to meet an unexpected person, Vivian. I was a bit surprised. Blake was really efficient. He had already let her into the house. My mother-in-law seemed to be completely unaware of Vivian's true identity. But she didn't deserve any sympathy because... Yo, isn't this the one who cheated my son's inheritance and didn't even give birth to a child? You're so shameless. Everything you have was bought by my son for you. How could you have the nerve to come back and take things? The thing I want isn't valuable, I replied coldly and walked straight to the bedroom that Caleb and I shared. The bedroom had been rummaged through. Those famous brand bags and necklaces were gone. My mother-in-law's voice sounded inappropriately at the door. What are you looking for? What about the doll I put on the bedside table? I asked her with a cold face. Inside the doll's belly were the stars he had folded for a whole day. On each star was written something we were going to do. We had once agreed to draw one and complete it every wedding anniversary. But now, with the wedding anniversary approaching, I was the only one left. You mean that Winnie the Pooh bear? I gave it away. How old are you, and still playing with such things? My mother-in-law said distaphonially. I was stunned. I had said the same thing to him at that time. How old are you, and still playing such tricks? Aren't you childish? If we want to do something, we can just do it right away. But he just hugged me, and laughed. His warm breath sprayed on my neck, and he said, You don't understand. This way. There's a sense of anticipation. He was gone. What was there left for me to anticipate in the rest of my life? 14, that's right. Such things for children are more suitable for me. Ante. After all, Caleb is gone. Let it accompany my child's growth, Vivian said, holding the Winnie the Pooh bear and appearing at the bedroom door. There was a faint smile on her face, which was quite different from the way I saw her that day. No, she was wearing designer clothes, with no shortage of necklaces, bracelets, and rings. Truly, heading fulfilled my obsession. Clothes make the man. I pretended to ask my mother-in-law. Who is she? You can't give birth, so naturally, there are others who can. I'm telling you. The child in her belly is the only child of our Caleb. You'd better be careful not to bump into her. I was stunned on the spot. And then shouted heartbreak. No, this can't be true. Caleb loved me so much. How could he betray me? You must be lying to me. I was like a mad person, waving my hands randomly. Seeing this, my mother-in-law quickly protected Vivian behind her. It's you. You must have your eyes on the Caleb family's money. Who knows whose bastard you're carrying? And you dare to smear my husband's reputation. I rushed towards Vivian like a crazy person. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure rushing towards me. I sneered. Finally, he couldn't hold back anymore. My father-in-law got angry. Who are you calling a bastard? The child in her belly is a bastard. My mother-in-law couldn't stand it anymore. She has done a paternity test with us. The child is from the Caleb family. Really? Is Caleb the only man in the Caleb family who can have children? I laughed. Then I started rummaging through the room. Finally, heading s'il vous plaît, I found the diagnostic responsibility form hidden under the bedboard. Take a look. After we've been married for so long without having a child, whose problem is it? The three big words on the diagnosis result came into view conspicuously, as the no spermiae. 15 My mother-in-law was the first to react. She plopped down on the ground and started throwing a tantrum. What evil have we done in our family? Caleb is already gone. And you're still here slandering him. Look at the date first. He had this checkup 3 years ago. Could I have had the foresight to frame him back then? The scene fell silent. For the past 3 years, I've been giving him traditional Chinese medicine to regulate his body. It was only when we moved back a year ago that I stopped the medicine. He wanted to have a child with me so much. No matter how bitter the traditional Chinese medicine was. He drank it without a single complaint for 3 years. You don't know your son well and are willing to pin the blame on him. But I know him. He definitely isn't the kind of person who would cheat. Chapter 5. I spoke with great determination. And even my usually unreasonable mother-in-law was stunned by me. But even I couldn't figure out how much of what I said was true and how much was false. The love was real. The memories were real. And the trust was real. But not absolute. The only thing I was sure of was that I wanted to take revenge on them and make their lives a living hell. My mother-in-law still tried to argue. But the facts are in front of us. You have this diagnosis. And I have the result of the paternity test. I smiled calmly. Mom. You should broaden your mind. What nonsense are you talking about? Get out. You have nothing to do with this place anymore. My father-in-law's face turned livid. And he issued an eviction order to me. He, who was always steady and friendly, finally lost his cool. Could it be? Could it be you too? My mother-in-law pointed at my father-in-law and Vivian, seemingly thinking of a possibility that she was absolutely unwilling to believe. And she couldn't even speak properly. There's nothing like that. So what if it is? 2 voices sounded simultaneously. 16. My father-in-law stared at Vivian in disbelief. What are you talking about? Am I wrong? You said that as long as I cooperated with you in this act, you would divorce her and marry me. Do you really want my son to be your grandson for the rest of his life? My mother-in-law couldn't accept such a large amount of information all at once. Her eyes rolled back. And she fainted. In a fit of rage. My father-in-law slapped Vivian. You fool. For a moment. One person fainted. And another 2 were fighting. The scene was in complete chaos. Fortunately, having fulfilled my answer, I remained orderly in the chaos and quickly called 120 to take my mother-in-law away. Thankfully, she was not seriously injured. She had just been overly frightened and woke up soon. Blake. I knew you've been unfaithful all these years. But how could you be so heartless as to let our son take the blame after his death? How could you? My mother-in-law was in tears. At this moment, she was just a poor middle-aged woman. Not only that. I dropped another bombshell. Dad. Caleb died because of you. Right? What did you say? Aurora. Explain yourself clearly. My mother-in-law asked me. 17. Before Caleb's accident, Dad transferred a large sum of money to him. I guess the real intention of this transfer was to make him a lobbyist to persuade Vivian to abort the child. Unfortunately, Caleb died due to this incident by some strange twist of fate, afraid of having no descendants. You set your sights on Vivian's child. To protect your own reputation. You even didn't spare your own son and framed him for everything. Blake didn't refute. My mother-in-law almost passed out again upon hearing this. Fortunately, I quickly pinched her philtrum. And she regained consciousness. Regardless of the needle still stuck in her hand, she got up and walked in front of Blake, slapping him hard. Her hand was trembling non-stop, whether from pain or anger. You're really a devil. I want a divorce. At our age. What's the point of getting a divorce? Besides, I'll send Vivian away. We'll soon have a new child. And we can go back to our old life. Isn't that good? My father-in-law tried to salvage the situation. My mother-in-law fell silent, seemingly seriously considering my father-in-law's suggestion. It's really a case of feeling sorry for her misfortune, yet being angry at her lack of resolve. Seeing that she was being swayed again, I quickly said, You say this because the Blake Group is preparing to go public soon. Right? You don't want any scandals to break out. Who would trust someone like you who can even use their own dead son? And you'd used Vivian like this. Does she agree? As far as I know, She's been dying to marry you. Humph. If you want me to make way for you and your mistress, I want 80 of the property. Otherwise, when that bastard is born, you can wait to leave the marriage penniless. You're dreaming. Then I won't agree to the divorce. Let's see who can outlast whom. They could afford to wait. But the child in the womb couldn't. 18 in a blink of an eye. Vivian reached her due date. The child was born smoothly. And it was a boy. Vivian took the child and Blake to do a paternity test. The result was, without a doubt, that the child was his biological son. She thought that since the child was born, she should have some status as the mother of the child. That the situation was a fait accompli. Did she still have any bargaining chips? Blake gave her 2 options. Either you give me the child, and I'll give you 3 million yuan. Or you take the child with you, and I'll give you 20,000 yuan for living expenses every month. What if I choose neither? Blake shrugged. It's up to you. Anyway, the child was here. And the top priority for now was to ensure the stable listing of the company. He was certain that if Vivian was smart, she would know what to choose. But not long after, a large number of scandals about him emerged online. In a fit of anger, Blake cut off the money he gave Vivian every month and threatened to sue her for violating privacy. Tut tut tut. This was wronging her, because that Expos article was posted by me. 19 Blake's retaliation pushed Vivian to the edge. And she decided that if she couldn't have a good life, neither could anyone else. So, she posted all of Blake's affairs, along with the paternity test, online, causing an immediate uproar. Because it was so outrageous. Netizens had all kinds of opinions. But most of them were skeptical about the truth of the matter. This was when I stepped in. I made public all the stigma I endured after Caleb's death and the grievances I suffered. Everyone condemned how there could be such a father in the world. He simply didn't deserve to be called a human being. Due to the scandal that broke out about Blake, the stock price of the Blake Group plummeted like a diving board. And the listing failed. Various partners sent lawyer letters one after another, saying they wanted to terminate the contracts. The business empire he had painstakingly built up in his lifetime suddenly collapsed. And he was also burdened with a huge amount of debt. He could barely save himself, let alone pay the promised 20,000 yuan per month. Later, Vivian sued Blake in court. Although the court ruled that he had to pay child support every month, the amount was far from what Vivian demanded. Now that the situation was extremely urgent, my mother-in-law finally thought of getting a divorce. But Blake naturally didn't agree. Seeing that her dream of becoming a rich lady was completely shattered, Vivian regretted it and actually left the child with the old couple and disappeared. Yet, fate played a cruel trick. Just before his accident, I got pregnant. Life was really hard. 20 compared to their miserable situation. My situation was much better. A few years passed, and the largest transportation hub in the city had taken shape, and several lines had been opened to traffic one after another. The few shops transferred to my name had been renovated and started operating smoothly. Later, I used the money I earned to lease several stores in the city center and open chain stores. I hired a lot of people, but I was still so busy that I could hardly keep my feet on the ground. And my income was quite substantial. In my spare time, I recalled the things I had agreed to do with Caleb. Whenever I remembered one, I would go and do it. But as time went by, the fewer things I could remember, and I could barely even recall what he looked like. I guessed that he might resent me too. Resent me for scheming so much against his parents. So he was so stingy that he didn't even want to give me memories. It was the anniversary of his death again. For the first time, he came into my dream, but he said he was leaving. He said he didn't blame me. In fact, over the years, I would also regularly send some money to his parents anonymously because the child was innocent after all. It could be regarded as fulfilling a bit of Caleb's responsibility as an older brother. This was the only thing I could do. The end.